Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 84. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier on in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at Network Nerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Hey, John, I'm doing great. I just had a thought, man. How would it be if the next time you did the intro like that, you did it in your best Vince McMahon voice? Just a thought.
I'll think about it.
Yeah. We're both pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
Awesome. I was going to say a journey to virtual enlightenment in my best Vince McMahon, but I actually haven't thought about how Vince McMahon speaks in so long that it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. All I can think of is, welcome everyone to Monday Night Raw.
The only thing I can think of is, Austin, it's me.
And the fireworks continue, ladies and gentlemen, because this time it's part 2 of the interview with Brad Pinkston. And I have to tell you, John, he went through a lot more uncertainty in his move to that director of global solutions consultant than I realized.
Yeah, that was really interesting to hear about. My favorite part, actually, you know what? Rather than talking about it, let's just get these people in. If you haven't listened to part 1, make sure you listen to part 1. There's great stuff there. If you're interested in that management position as part of your career path, Brad talked about a lot about it there. He's going to talk about it some more here. So let's get into episode 84, part 2 with Brad Pinkston.
I think that instead of telling, that person what my boss, what my boss needs to think about them, just turn it around on them. What do you want them to think? Like, what do you think equals doing a good job? And then the conversation starts creating itself because that person will kind of realize where their gaps are. And if they're too stubborn to realize it, then it sets other wheels in motion that might be better as well.
Well, it's interesting because it sounds a lot like account development processes and sales development processes, right? Like if you sit down and say, hey, map out this organization for me, here's the chief information officer, who are their reports? What are the VPs that report to that CIO? And then what are the directors that report to those VPs, and then, who handles this and who handles this part of the infrastructure and who handles, these kinds of questions. And then if you just have this standard set of questions that you ask about an organization, and then, hey, what's important to the CIO? What's important to the CEO of that company? How is what, we are doing as a company relevant to those concerns, that those C-level executives have? And if you don't have any answers and there's gaps in information there, then you've just exposed those gaps and you've exposed the things that you need to work on. So it's very, very analogous to what, technical salespeople are doing on a routine basis. They just haven't applied it to career advancement. And I would probably say the same thing for someone who's just a general IT practitioner. Hey, if you're running IT for a medium-sized business, what do the VPs care about? What are they judged on? Do you not know? If you don't know, then you just expose some information that you need to go get in order to be more relevant to that IT organization, right? Just very analogous. It's very interesting that I've never thought about it that way until you said it the way you said it. Again, not a question, just an observation.
That's John's second epiphany during this episode.
That's my brand.
Your epiphany off of something I said kind of makes me sound smarter than I really am, John. So I need to surround myself with you more often.
Well, we did
Also my
have you
brand.
on to say smart manager things, so it sounds like he made you sound smart. I love
That's
it.
my strategy, Nick, is just surround myself with people smarter than me, and and I'll air quotes lead the team of people smarter than me, and things just kind of fall in place.
Yeah. Hey, it's a good strategy.
That's a very good strategy, actually. I noticed that you said some things that were analogous about the interview process, advancing your career. Like you just in general, if you're starting to interview for new positions, like you never schedule the first interview with like your dream job, right? That's something that you said. So your first management interview wasn't for a position that was your dream management position. But were there differences just in that process and the way that you approached it, like that really stuck out to you as different from interviewing for an individual contributor position?
So to make sure, and to clarify, the first one that I interviewed for, John, was
Mm-hmm.
100% my dream job. Like,
Oh, really? Okay.
I was devastated when I didn't get it. So this whole philosophy on, treating treating interviewing the same way that we treat the certification test, that
Mm-hmm.
didn't evolve until later in my career.
Okay.
I'll say.
That was a lesson learned then.
Exactly, lesson learned. But it did develop, very quickly. When I saw the gap of, oh, my expectations were way down there, and I should have been having conversations up here. Okay, this is like a certification test, right? I now know what I need to go do.
Yeah, that's very similar to any kind of like individual contributor job, right? There's a certain set of questions that you're probably going to be asked, about like collaborating with team and how you resolve conflicts with teammates. But if you go into a management, interview and you can't answer the question, what's your management style or leadership philosophy, you're going to stumble. Like
Yeah.
you need to know that those kinds of questions are going to be asked.
And, I think that the philosophy on the way that I treat that whole interview process is very very much the same on an individual contributor, and even more applicable on individual contributor jobs because there are more of them, right? So that next opportunity is going to come up probably sooner. The next dream job, if you will, is probably going to come up sooner if you're out there actively, looking and that kind of thing. So it's even easier to, all right, I interviewed, I failed on this one. This company it prioritizes this. I interviewed here. This industry prioritizes that. Those kind of things. And I guess I probably should make sure, and warning, you probably don't want to interview 15 times. If you really want to work for Amazon, don't pick 15 crappy jobs, and then because you probably aren't going to get that 16th interview. So make sure and and temper this a little bit. But I would say that the philosophy still applies to individual contributors.
Yeah, that's good. And maybe getting somebody in your extended network who is a manager to mentor you and kind of interview you informally might help too. That's just something I thought of.
Yeah, actually, going through that kind of thing right now with one of the folks on my team that is showing interest in pursuing a management path. He's interviewing informally with my boss, with one of the sales managers, and some other people that I've set that thing up for him. Kind of like a mock interview, so that he gets the real process that I just went through.
And it seems like those folks in higher places are pretty willing to offer up time for this kind of thing because of the focus on career development and retention.
Yeah, I feel like, and keep in mind, I've been in leadership in VMware seen it in other places. But I do think that more and more big companies like this are it's being necessitated to create a better leadership culture like this, or to your point, Nick, they lose talent. So I would say that this is probably going to apply in almost any company that, that we're talking about.
Yeah. Good advice. So speaking of leadership, one of the things that I've noticed is that you've had to switch managers twice in the last year. So I'm just really curious to pick your brain, Brad, on how you prepared for those transitions, because you're already a manager and you're reporting up to a solution engineering director, if I'm not mistaken. So how do you mentally prepare for that shift in your management, and what advice would you give somebody else when transitioning to a new manager?
So to some extent, I feel like I've kind of become an expert at this, Nick. I actually had to go back and count, as an individual contributor at VMware. In 4 years, I had four bosses, and in my management time at VMware, it'll be 5 years in October, and in 5 years, I've had five bosses. So,
Wow.
that's kind of a good thing in my mind, because typically, if your manager's changing, the company's growing. We typically don't. Most companies don't want to change the organization just for the sake of change. It's because there's growth, or something like that. So, I've found it a good thing. But the way that I've handled it, and turned it into a good thing is, I think that, and I do speak for myself on this. I do what I would want. I do with my new boss what I would want, my team to do for me. I want to know up front, what do you want to do? What do you feel you're good at? How do you like to be communicated with? The faster that we can get up to speed and make the relationship productive, as opposed to, let's do this introduction dance for a few weeks. The better it is. So one of the first things that I do, and it's kind of an icebreaker as well. So it's one of the first questions I ask when I have a new boss is, how do you like to be communicated with, right? Because now there's so many communication channels, and if I'm expected to be communicating, people to communicate with me in a certain way, and then people don't, I get frustrated, and I might associate some of that frustration with that person, which isn't fair, but it's human nature. So I try to be better at it. So the first thing that I do with my boss is, do you like, what are all the different mechanisms we use now? Teams, Slack. We've got. Are you a texter? Do you want email? Do you want me to call? What's the best way for us to communicate the most effectively?
Daily Zoom invite.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Do you like video on? Anytime you're on Zoom. I actually had recently a boss's boss that I interacted with a lot. And he was if you're on Zoom, your video's on kind of guy. And so I immediately tried to adapt to that. But that conversation of how you like to be communicated with, it's kind of an icebreaker, and a really nice, in my opinion, olive branch on, look, I'm going to try to make you managing me as easy as possible for you. So, it starts that, and that helps, I think by trade, most SEs are just more humble than they should be. This is a good opportunity to not be super humble. Don't be arrogant either, but talk about some of the good things that you've done. So that your new boss knows that you're confident. A confident SE is a good SE, so they know what to give you to do, what you can be good at, and they're expecting you to do a certain thing, but the way that you do that thing is you delegate it to your team because you know that that's not one of the things that you're good at. You've now set the anchor of, hey, I'm a little bit different. I'm going to farm that out, but I'm really good at this thing over here. Watch me do that. Take the opportunity to set the stage as opposed to waiting for it to be set for you.
We're speechless. That's great stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's maybe that's the first 30 days. There's probably a lot more to it than that.
No, I totally I understand that. It's setting the tone, making that as transition as frictionless as possible, and smoothing out all the things that can be smoothed out, right? How do I make what's generally can be a difficult process as easy as possible? So
yeah, and that kind of opens the door, like you said, to allow them to communicate other expectations that maybe you didn't bring up. Oh yeah, I prefer this, and they might tell you some other things that they prefer, not just communication, like I need these reports done by this day, and we're doing forecast calls on this day, so have your team be ready.
Exactly. When do the TPS reports due?
So you mentioned this move to globals. Can you talk a little bit about that process? It sounds to me like in general you've had positive relationships with your reports. What was it like talking to your manager about, taking this position or even going for that position?
I hope everybody is as lucky as I am about support for those kind of things. I've been trying to not use names and call people out specifically, but since this is a positive, I'm going to call Yvette Edwards out and say thank you for the support that she gave me on this. I mean, all I did was it was mentioned to her that someone had brought this role to my attention. It was something new, an opportunity to further my career, and I wanted to just find out more about it. And she was, amazingly supportive. And I've been lucky enough to have the same experience every time I've gone, for that, for that type of change or career progression. And to expand on it even more, it was really, really important to me because it was hard to make the decision to leave my team. So if I wouldn't have had support from my existing manager that, she recognized and validated that this is, a career expansion opportunity, it would have made it even harder. So, even more reason to recognize that good managers are going to encourage your career mobility.
Right. And I would probably add to that, they're going to encourage it even if it causes them a little bit of pain in the short term by not having you on the team.
Yeah. This is a bit of a tangent or a rat hole, but one of the things that you kind of prompted me with, one of the questions, Nick, was what was the best advice a manager ever gave you? And the guy, if he's listening, will know for sure because I've told him how funny and impactful this was. But I'd made a bad choice about a flight expense or something like that very early on in my career at VMware, and my manager made as we were talking about me being at that meeting with a very, very expensive flight. Before he hung up, he told me, Brad, I just need you to remember something. You're not that important. and I read a lot into it. I think he meant it just as simply as, look, we got to keep expenses down, But reflecting back on that funny moment in my career, it reminds me that I'm not I'm not irreplaceable. You know, and the reason it sparked it in my mind, Nick, is the fact that you said that it might cause a little bit of pain. You know, man, I'm not irreplaceable. We got so many good leaders at VMware. That there was somebody else was able to, to take on the role that I was playing before. It gave somebody else an opportunity to expand their career and do something new. And, the team wasn't going to collapse, if I moved on. And, I kind of thought to myself and laughed, Brad, you're just not that important.
That's hilarious. I mean, you wouldn't have been that great of a leader if you left and the team collapsed, I guess, right?
Yeah, there were multiple plans for succession planning and things like that, and we were able to just execute on one of them. And I know that Nick just desperately misses me, but I know that his new manager is a fantastic leader as well.
I do. I feel so abandoned. It hurts. It hurts.
It's not that you took this new job. It's more like you were getting away from Nick, is what I'm hearing.
That's what it sounds like. That's
Okay.
how I took it personally.
We'll talk offline, John.
So how about that transition to the new team? I think you've mentioned before about, kind of laying off the kind of career discussion early on, but what about the other types of transitions as you start managing a new team? Especially, I mean, I guess this is like a new team, specifically for a job that you hadn't done before, right? At VMware, you hadn't been a global solution consultant. So not that every manager needs to manage, only jobs that they've ever done before, right? That doesn't make any sense. But what was that transition like?
I learned, in my first management role when I first started that I needed to, trust and have confidence in the people that picked me, that my skill set was, right for the job. So, I came in confident in the fact that I'm not quite sure exactly what I need to do, but these people think that I've got the right skill set. So I know that I've got the right skill set. Let's figure out why I've got the right skill set. And I think that, to some extent, we just do what's natural to us as SEs, right? I'm an SE by trade, SE by mentality, and the way that I fix, and this is what attracts me to management, is because people management and everything else, it's just solving problems, right? And that's what we all do as engineers, right? How do we solve a problem as an engineer? How do I solve the problem, with this team from where we are to where we want to get to? It's as simple as assessing current state, because if I don't know where I am, I can't get to where I want to go. And then put together okay, well, I know where we want to go, with culture, with revenue, with, team atmosphere, with, growing the accounts, et cetera, et cetera. Let's do some goal setting. And then let's develop a plan to move current state to future state. And if you break it down that simply, and you've got, that type of fundamental, here's what it is, here's what we want it to be, let's progress it from current to future, everything just kind of starts falling into place. And that's the way that I tackled this. And, I'm continuing to just stay confident in the plan, just execute the plan, stay the course. Even when, like, as we all are with COVID and everything else that's going on, I just don't see how there's enough hours in the day to get done what I want to get done. But keep the faith. We've seen some amazing growth numbers, which is what we want to continue here. So, Yeah, stay the course. Lead the team. Make sure and celebrate the little wins. We might not have hit our number, but we did hit 130% growth year over year. So you got to celebrate that kind of stuff. And but that's the way that I've led the team so far. It hasn't really been a big transition because I just tried to fix the problem.
Yeah, that's a great point because you took over during a time of significant uncertainty for everybody, in a time of uncertainty about who their boss would be.
Yeah.
So you had to kind of set your team at ease from the get-go and pull them up to where they need to be. I just realized that after you said it.
Yeah, I have to imagine for the most part, or maybe even 100%, like you've never managed these people or sat face to face with these people as their manager, right? If you just took over a couple months ago, that was during, lockdown and during, social isolation or social distancing. So that must have provided some new challenges that maybe you wouldn't have had normally. Am I
You
right?
know, the interesting thing, to that point, John, that I don't think it's been super challenging. We'll see once I do start, getting the opportunity to see him face to face, and I desperately want to. But I've tried to prioritize one-on-ones, videos always on, kind of stuff, and it does make a difference. So that hasn't been as difficult. What has been extremely difficult is, and I didn't even think about this, is I wasn't just taking over a team where another manager had left. What they did is within my segment, within my organization, there were different regions, if you will, that had, say, 7 accounts in each region. And so they cherry picked a few out of each region and brought them into this region that I'm now leading. So I didn't really think about that. I was just like, oh yeah, accounts from each region, good stuff. Well, then the people come together as well, and the people didn't even know each other. So, none of the GSCs on my team had really been a cohesive team before. So, actually, the thing that I had to focus on as far as interpersonal relationships wasn't me with them, it was them with each other. Because that collaboration is vastly important, on success for this kind of team. And so I needed to, and that was part of that current state assessment, right? I had the wrong assessment of current state. I didn't think I was going to have to do a lot around, team building, rah, 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 that kind of stuff, which is very, very important. But I needed to put that into my plan. And so that's really been the biggest problem that COVID has thrown, a monkey wrench into our new team operating at peak efficiency.
Yeah, that in-person meeting, at a restaurant or, having snacks at a happy hour or, some of those types of like team building, like interpersonal relationship building, without that history with each other, I can see how that's an issue. It's not that you were taking over a pre-existing team, you were building a new team and taking over. Yeah, wow. And COVID. Wow, that's really challenging.
Well, and let me add one more. I'm pretty sure, I don't know this 100% sure, but you came from managing a team that was mostly Dallas, Fort Worth, and one person from Austin. My understanding is that these folks are spread out more across the country, right? So they're not, they can't just come to where you are once this blows over with a 30-minute drive or 15-minute drive.
Yep, I got 1 East Coast, 2 Central, and 3 Pacific. And Arizona should be Mountain and not Pacific. I'm going on record right now. It's confusing. But time zone management has been interesting, right? I know it won't be this way forever, but it's been important to me to, try to start my day at 7 and not end until 7. Because, I want to, I want to be involved. I want them to not, think, well, there was COVID Brad and now there's real Brad, right? And that's just something that I had to be comfortable with to support my team. Actually, before we did this, I was on a technical QBR that didn't end until 7 my time, but 5, for my GSC on the West Coast. But it was important to me to support him, even though I just sat there and listened on the Zoom. It was important to me to support him so that we continue to build that interpersonal relationship.
Very, very cool. Something you mentioned even before, which was camera on meetings, and just phone calls, like just audio doesn't give you all the cues. And when I came over to Google, like that was one of the big cultural shocks that I had was the expectation, the norm was your camera's on. And, of course, like people have good reasons to have them off sometimes, like if they're eating lunch and they don't want, just to expose their gobbling habits or whatever, or like, hey, I just don't want to subject you to my morning face or whatever it is. But, that is a cultural shift, and sometimes that can be difficult.
Yeah. It's been challenging building a new team around this, but it's just been a new muscle to flex, and it's been a good thing to learn.
Sure. And I'm sure, as a manager, it's like yet another one of those skills that you need to have in your repertoire, right? Of management, building new teams, or, as opposed to growing new teams, or as opposed to taking over, troubled teams and turning them around. Like there's all these different scenarios that you want to have experience in as a manager. And it's one of those things. I recognize that again, and my analogy as a individual contributor, like my experience at VMware was almost exclusively with existing accounts, and then when I moved over to Google, I had almost all greenfield accounts, and I realized, wow, I felt like I was a pretty experienced SE, but this was a muscle that I hadn't flexed before, breaking into a new company. So I can see how breaking in, like, one of those skills is, it's scary, but it's also exhilarating at the same time.
Yeah.
Again, not a question, just an observation. That's what I do.
Well, I'm gonna pull a John on John. My epiphany from that is, I'm sure you did exactly what I did, right? I mean, you might not have done exactly that before. You might have needed a Phillips head screwdriver for the job, but you can pull out the old standard and get the job done. Just pull out one of the things that you've done before and apply that to the new situation, and that way you're not starting from scratch. You're able to get the job done. It might not be the most efficient, but experience is your toolkit there.
Well, I'm guessing it's like most things where you have to let go of being perfect at something, especially, even if you're coming from a situation where you're like used to performing at a high level. Like I feel like I've hit on something that like an inside joke. You guys are both laughing.
Yeah. No,
you want to say it, or you want me to? Go ahead.
Go ahead, Nick.
Well, no, I will always hear Brad Pinkston's voice telling me that perfect is the enemy of complete. There were many a times where I was trying to tweak something to my own view of completeness and perfection. He was like, sometimes you just got to let it go, man. Sometimes you just have to say that's good enough. It's never going to be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's hard for technical people to do that, but yeah, perfect is the enemy of done.
Yep, I hear you. Interestingly enough here, Brad, you also had to adapt to being on a new team of peers, right? Because all your peers were on a totally different team than the one you were on before, right?
So, it's interesting, Nick, that, you bring that up because in this situation, I was new to a group of peers, but to a lot of extent, that new team was forming as well. And I think that when you have things like this happen, and because of the situation I was in, we had expanded the team, and a new strategy had come in. And keep following me here, and you'll understand where I'm going. My boss was new to managing the team that I'm on now. And so not only was, I had the dynamic to think about where I've got a bunch of peers that have been in these roles for a while and a lot to learn from. I've got my new manager who's a new manager to all of them, and he's trying to instill some newness of different things as well. So, I had to quickly, learn and adapt to the fact that, I've got to balance the fact that I can't be new guy and talk about, what we used to do all the time, because nobody really wants to just continuously hear from new guy about, well, this is the way I've always done it. I had to learn from my peers so that they would allow me to give them some teachings or best practices that I had. So I had to balance that, but at the same time, my boss was creating this new team atmosphere or culture. You know, uh, Same people with me being the one new guy, but a new team, if you will, because of the fact that he was instilling a new culture. So it was a really, really interesting dynamic on the fact that I was a participant, but was very quickly kind of thrust into I need to talk more and be a leader more than I probably typically would, because I knew my boss wanted me to talk about certain things.
Got it.
Does that, I don't really think that answers where you were going specifically, because it was such a unique case. But hopefully that helps shine a light on the fact that you got to assess the situation, because very quickly I determined, oh, this isn't going to be the classic I'm just jumping into an existing team and I'm the new member. It was a very different dynamic, and I had to adapt quickly.
I don't think that it's that uncommon though, right? Because a lot of times when like a higher level middle management change is made, it's because exactly what you said. It's expansion. It's any number of things, and the organization is shaking up. A lot of people are moving up. A lot of people are moving laterally or diagonally, and all of a sudden you have a new manager, a new team, and things are being recreated. So you're moving into the role and everything's changing at the same time. That's not that uncommon,
It's a good
right?
point, John.
Was that specific team dynamic something you realized before you were already over there? Like, did it ever cross your mind as you're weighing the decision to, do I do this, do I not do this, and take the new
No,
job?
no. Luckily, I actually knew out of my peers, I knew three of the five other directors on my team. So there's six of us directors on the team, and three of the five I knew. So I was relatively no, I'm sorry, four of the six I knew. So I didn't know them extremely well, but I knew that they were very accomplished, good leaders. So I knew that I had, something to learn from them. They could kind of show me the ropes. So, I did that, and that established some opportunity for me to come in and kind of adapt quickly. So I never really questioned was there going to be some odd dynamic, because I knew and respected the individuals enough to know that they were all established and accomplished leaders in their own right.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. One of the things I wanted to ask about, Brad, I feel like when people go after a job that they really want, whether or not they think it's a little bit of a stretch goal or some kind of different situation, maybe at some point in the process, there's always that element of doubt and fear of leaving what's familiar. Did that happen to you at any point in the process? And if so, how did you get past it?
I think that if you don't acknowledge that existed, then you're lying to other people and to yourself, is my opinion of that, Nick. So yeah, I absolutely had some fear of the unknown. I don't think I ever really had fear of can I do the job. Luckily I've had good leaders that have inspired confidence in me, and I felt like I'd asked the right questions to understand what the job was going to be. But you always wonder about what they told you in the hiring process. Is it going to hold up when you get there? So I knew exactly what the situation of the business was, the situation of the talent, the situation of the accounts was in the old position that I was in. Is it going to be kind of like the situation with the team that I joined, where I thought it was going to be one thing, but it's kind of a 30 to 40 degree turn, and not 180 degrees by any means, not even 90 degrees, but sometimes that 30 to 40 degrees can really impact your success. And I had kind of a come to Jesus with the fact that I thought that it would inspire a significant, amount of extra energy in me. It was an opportunity for me to continue to build my brand. And those things outweighed the fear of the unknown. And the bigger thing than the fear of the unknown was just the gut-wrenching, emotion that I had to leave the team that I had built, that the team members that I led, walking away from something that we had built together. That was the hardest part. Fear of the unknown was a distant second.
So it was what you were walking away from, not what you were walking towards.
Exactly.
Loss aversion.
Yeah. And ultimately, you guys know, because I'm in the position. I decided that what the fear of the unknown of what I was walking to wasn't enough to keep me in the role. And I also had those epiphanies where, Brad, you're just not that important. Those kind of things where, the team was going to be fine. It wasn't going to fall apart if I left. It was not I'm the only person that can do this job, and I built this, and I'm uniquely positioned to be able to keep it together. It was more of the fact that I love these folks. I love this team, not just the 7 SEs that were on my team, the extended team. I had relationships, throughout those folks. And, that was what held me back. And when I realized that, you can't always let that drive what you're doing in your career. You'll keep a lot of those relationships. That was when that's what finally pushed me over the edge. A perfect example is the fact that, you guys, Nick, you and John worked together at VMware. And now, John, you've moved on to, what you think is better for you and your career at Google. It doesn't mean that you guys have just scrapped your relationship. Those hold on, and that finally, that epiphany finally came, and I was like, okay, this is the right thing for me to do.
Right. You're not really leaving those people behind.
Exactly.
Got it. Well, Brad, I really appreciate all the time that you've spent with us. Any closing thoughts, anything that, you feel like maybe we missed, or words of wisdom that you wish we had pulled out of you?
Just I guess a wrap up on a few of those points. I talked about decide what you want to do, make sure people know about it, and don't be afraid to be bold and figure out what you want to do and go for it. Go with your gut. It leads a lot of us, and uh, it'll do you wrong sometimes, but you're gonna hit a much higher batting average if you just follow it. So just encourage everybody to go for what they want.
Appreciate that. Thanks so much, Brad, for joining us on the Nerd Journey podcast. We wish you good luck, and we'll circle back and talk to you again sometime about the next big move.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it, Nick. You guys, it's great to see the passion that you guys have for this kind of thing, and I wish that it was something that I had when I started off, and maybe some of those failures wouldn't have been quite so painful. So, thanks for having me, and hopefully, this was valuable to everybody listening.
Cool.
Oh, no question about it. Thanks again.
Definitely was, yeah. Man, John, can you believe that the first time Brad was completely crushed in an interview was when he was going for what he thought his dream job was?
It was so funny because I had just assumed that he was following the classic advice of interview a bunch of times, where you don't care before you go for one that you care about. But I was quickly corrected.
The correct answer is take the hardest punch to the face first. And then get up and figure out how to move past it.
Yeah. But even with this current position, like all that uncertainty and all the adjustments that he's making to new teammates, to a new manager, to a new team, it's just fascinating to hear that that kind of thing happens as a manager too, not just to individual contributors. And I just never thought about it from the perspective of somebody who's going through that and is managing a team of people.
Yeah, we don't often think about that since we live through the lens of the individual contributor. I really liked his advice for transitioning to a new manager and breaking the ice, figuring out how they want to be communicated with, and trying to make it as easy as possible for them to manage you. That's something that I'm going to keep in mind, for the next time my manager changes.
Yeah, actually, it's a question that I actually haven't asked my current manager, so maybe I will ask that question.
Good call.
Yeah. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, just a reminder, we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter @NerdJourney.
All right. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White @VJourneyman for Nick Cordy @NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.